once again. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, and we'll be speaking of tonight's vice presidential debate. Tonight, that is, if you are catching us live, as well as Mayor Adams being indicted. What we think about that? Should he resign? Should he stay in office? Of course, I'm joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Uh, Starting off the morning with some allergies. That's what's going on.
Also known as
But
Timid.
huh?
Oh, no, that was a little bit of an echo. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, but other than that, um, same old, man. That's what it is.
So
So
I
how about yourself?
actually am just back from Maryland and Virginia, where
Right, that's right.
I was filming content. And it's so funny, right? Because I mentioned before feeling like I just woke up from a coma and I found myself in this new world of music promotion. Could you imagine back in 2004, let's say 20 years ago, when we were working on music and doing shows and whatnot, we would take a trip somewhere and be like, all right, we're going to spend a weekend filming content. Like that wouldn't even be a thought.
Yeah, because that wasn't the thing. You know what I mean?
It was pre-social media, really.
Right. So it wasn't really about content for social media. It wasn't what people were doing then.
Right. But even on the MySpace period, we weren't really filming content. Now we did do certain things, like we would film behind the scenes footage of our trips, right? So if we took a weekend trip, did a few shows, we would take footage from the road and edit that together and put it online. We had some stuff up on the early days of YouTube, right? So that was going on. I think there were even some streaming video services that we used back in the day that would stream a continuous loop of our stuff on our MySpace pages. And so we would do things like that. So I guess that would be the early iterations of it.
Yeah, we had what I forget what that was. It was we had a TV channel,
Yeah, yeah.
an
Fam,
internet
Fam
TV
TV, we
channel.
called it. Was that Ustream or something like that? I forget the name of
It
it.
was something like Ustream. There were two of
Yeah,
them back then. One of them was like Ustream. One was Ustream, and then there was another, and I can't think of the name of it, but um, it was actually really dope because you could schedule your whole programming.
right.
And so we set that up, and we did it twice. We also did it for the first political campaign too. We used a similar thing for
Oh, did
that.
we?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where we had like a 24/7 roll of footage.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
that is pretty interesting. Yeah, I remember we did a lot of cool stuff on the MySpace pages. I remember, you can just open up someone's MySpace page and see a screen, a little window of their video footage. And it's a kind of a cool way to bring people in. I guess it is like what you would call content today because, the music could be good, but to draw people's attention, to try to generate interest, right? To get
right.
discovered by someone, sometimes it takes a little bit more because there's just so much music. The music is so oversaturated. So how are you going to how are you going to catch their attention first to bring them in? So that's one way that I think was effective and still is, right? Where
Right.
maybe they're scrolling through, they're looking, checking things out, and all of a sudden they see a video of something, a skit, a performance, a behind the scenes footage, something interesting, right? It's like, oh, what is this? Let me look at this a little bit. You know what I mean? I can draw them in. So that is cool. And it's a way to show personality or a different side that you might not get just from the music,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, we
know?
used a bunch of different tactics that I don't think a lot of people were using at the time. I think we were kind of I don't know if it's egotistical to say, but I think some of the things we did were a little cutting edge. Like for example, the scheduling the TV, the like the TV channel online,
Yeah.
but also we had the Say Now phone number, right?
Right.
Where
Right.
we
I remember
did
that. And
right.
people thought
So
that that was my actual number. You probably got some of those messages also.
right,
Because what you do is you would put the phone number that they gave you through the service on your profile on MySpace, let's
right,
say, and then have your name, call me at blah blah blah. And so people will be messaging me like, "Why are you putting your number out there?" Or thinking it was like a private line, like like,
right,
"Oh, can we chat? Can I text you?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can contact this number, but this is for our group. This is a promotional line essentially." And then it was a good way to get subscribers because I think once they interacted with that line, we were able
right.
to blast content out to them, right?
Right, absolutely. And m most of the people that were signed up on that service were much bigger than we were. And so I don't even know how we got into it, but yeah, we ended up we got that line on there.
Right, right. I do remember that. I
Yeah.
don't think you could just, yeah, because they actually gave you a dedicated phone number. So I don't think anyone could
Right.
just sign up. Because imagine you have like a million people trying to get that. Yeah, I think it was like a club you had to get into, and somehow we convinced them to let us in.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we also did we both released documentaries with our albums.
Right.
This is before, like I said, before YouTube was a big thing or really that much of a thing, but we were distributing physical media with the CDs as well that were documentaries that we put together on them. So
Yeah, yeah. And by the
yeah.
way, podcasting, I think, from an early time also, because this
Yeah.
podcast is a few years old now, but we did one years prior,
Right.
probably right early on in the podcasting days, and also an online radio show. We were kind of
Right.
at the forefront of that too.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
So it's interesting how things change on and what kind of I guess content or marketing that
Yeah.
people do
Yeah.
in different times to get attention and to get stuff out there, get your name in front of people or just to be active. So
Right, right. And it seemed like back then when we would record content, which we wouldn't call it that, but if we were doing that, it would seem to go hand in hand with something else we were doing. Like, for example, behind the scenes at a show, or
right,
look at the music we just made that we're working on, or interview
right,
stuff, but it
right,
wasn't usually let's go out and just film content about what was, we'll figure it out after. It was more like we were doing something, and then when we were doing it, we were like, let's get the camera out, as
right,
opposed to
right,
right, like proactively thinking we're going to create content, which is kind of I think what you do now, especially with TikTok and YouTube Shorts and things like that. It seems
right,
because back then, for example, you had a MySpace list, you can send out a bulletin. So that was kind of like your content. You didn't have to do videos every day of something else interesting.
right,
That's part of that you can incorporate it in there, right? But you can interact with people in so many other different ways. Now it
yeah,
seems like video really is front and center. I guess because it's easier to do and to host, right? Everything is streaming and faster
right,
now than it used to be. So it's more convenient to be able to have a lot of videos being pumped out and consumed at once. And
right,
so it seems like that is the main way people are getting noticed, getting themselves noticed now, right? And so now it's like, basically a job of the musician or really anyone trying to market themselves in this social media climate to pump out a lot of video content. So it's like part of your responsibilities. It's like here's
right,
the substance of what I'm creating, but I also have to schedule time to create content for it.
right, right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it would be interesting if the what we were doing then was during this era of content now.
Mm,
Because we'd just be, we'd have outlets for a lot of that stuff more than we had
true.
before. 'Cause before it
Yes.
was like we'd
Yeah.
have it and we put it up on our website, but it wasn't about remixing the content, stretching it out, doing it was just like, okay, here's the video. We had some video taken. Watch this. Or even back then when YouTube, but it wasn't really YouTube like today with this idea of spreading so much content. It was more like a repository
Right.
of your data, your
Right. It was
information.
longer form content too, right? Now you have the
And so,
shorts, and I guess probably even with
right.
Twitter, we can talk about that. The attention span on social media has lessened, and
Yeah.
so you also have a lot more people competing for attention, I guess, right? So it's just a
Yeah,
different
sure, sure,
dynamic.
sure.
So yeah, so back like you were saying back then, you would put up a whole long form video on YouTube, whereas you can still do that now, but that doesn't really get the traction organically as much as these shorts, right? You can do the shorts, the short form content to draw attention to your longer form content.
Well, that's kind of what some people are doing, yeah.
Yeah.
And then long form content is actually growing right now on YouTube, but it's just yeah, we could have taken some of that and then broken it up more into parts, doing some short form. We could
Oh,
have
you
done
mean
it.
you mean today? If today's
Yeah,
one, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So like for example, and I think we kind of did a little bit like that, but just the climate was a little bit different.
Right, of course.
Just like the album release party, right? There was just
Mhm.
released it in parts, but it's a little bit different than from today, where people are consuming so much more on platforms like
Yeah.
YouTube than they were back then.
Right. Well, what's interesting is with the album release party, we did put up parts of it. For example, I had my opening acts in the 2006 show where we had a radio contest to see who was going to open for the show. And so I did a whole video documenting that about the two finalists, and they had all these calls at the radio station, and we had a winner, and then the group that won got to open, so we got to see some video of them performing, and then they brought on the runner-up, and they performed as well, and so actually both finalists got on the stage, so we had a whole video showing all of that. But that's still a few minutes. I mean, I don't know how long it was, but it's not like
Right.
it's a 15, 20-second, 30-second video like you would see now. And
Right.
so even though we did have parts, even like some songs, I cut up some songs from, I think, the 2007 show. Like, I think, it's a video, Timid, Better Days Live, but it's still a whole song, right? Now,
Right.
I think you would probably take a part of the song and put that on, maybe 15, 20 seconds of it, and use that as a short form.
Sure, sure, sure. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
we're moving more and more in that direction as a society, I guess, right? Things are more about digestible sound bites, really, right? I mean, you see that in our politics too.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like I said, attention spans, not just that, but competing against so much other
Mhm.
content. It's
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot.
Well, yeah, think about the TikTok algorithm, right? You're just scrolling through videos, and they said you got to get someone's attention in that first second, because why? There's an endless stream of videos. If that's boring or whatever, it doesn't grab them. Next, next, next. It's like,
Right.
and they keep getting, I guess, a dopamine hit every time they see something new, and they try to find something they
Yeah.
like, right? And so obviously it's meant to be addicting and keep you on the app, but that's
Yeah.
what you're competing with. You're competing with, as a content creator, all these other videos that, an infinite, essentially, number of videos that people can just be scrolling through. And so
Yeah.
you really do need to create a lot, and really try to grab their attention right away. It's
Yeah.
not like it used to be, where it's like, oh, this really gets good in minute 5 or 6, because they're gone after second 2 or 3.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, hopefully people aren't gone by now.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah.
So speaking of being gone, did you say your man Plies was a little gone in the rant that he made? What was he saying?
Plies is interesting because he's been very vocal about politics, especially this presidential election, and he's usually got some takes that are really on point. And he had a rant recently this past week where he was talking about, and essentially it came down to messaging, what he was saying about Democrats and messaging.
Mhm.
So he was saying that, listen, we all know Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, is a threat to the country. We all know this. And you Democrats are telling us this, that he's a threat to democracy. Why aren't you acting like it? Why isn't Kamala everywhere trying to get the word out? Why aren't the other Democrats rallying around getting this message out?
There's a
Where
reason for
is
that,
the
though.
act of urgency in making sure that this threat to democracy doesn't come to power?
Well, there's a reason for that. The reason why they're not yelling that all the time is because it doesn't poll well. It doesn't resonate with most voters. And so I think their urgency is trying to win the election. And if that messaging isn't working, they're going to go with the messaging that is working better to try to save democracy, right? That's how they see it. They see it as they're
Right.
trying to win this race to save democracy. But the messaging doesn't have to be, we need to save democracy every single day, because if that doesn't work, go with what works.
I think, yeah, and I think also it's not just the words physically to say that, he's a threat to democracy, but in acting like, not acting like it's a level playing field, right? Like, and we see the media do this, right? They still treat like Trump and Kamala like they're still the same type of candidate when it's vastly different, right?
Yeah.
One is clearly out there crazy talking about people eating cats and dogs, and the other one is talking about policy. They're
Yeah.
not on the same page. And so that part as well, like why isn't this message somehow being communicated well enough by the Democratic side that, listen, I mean, this is not the same thing here. We're not talking apples to apples here. Like,
Yeah, well, I think Democrats know that. And I think most people are already in their camps. It's a matter of reaching the people on the margins. Who are the people on the margins? They're the
yeah,
ones who maybe voted for Trump in 16 and Biden in 20, or they switch
right,
their votes around, right? And so you're not going to get them with the tribal politics as much. I mean, for better or
right,
worse, both sides have been legitimized by the media, by the public, by
right,
virtue of being the major party nominees, and in Trump's case, being a former president. And so, yeah, you
right.
can say he's crazy and whatever, but he has that track record of winning the Republican vote and being president, right? And so he
No,
does have that legitimacy, just by virtue of the positions that he's held and how far he's gotten himself. And so people now are well aware of Trump and all his issues and everything else, but they're still on the fence. Some people are on it, not many people, right? But some people may be on the fence. And the question is, how do you reach those voters?
Right. But I think what he's saying is also pretty valid because he just feels like Democrats aren't activated enough. At
Mm-hmm.
least the elected officials don't seem to be activated enough to deal with this in a sense of urgency at like it actually is. And
Well, but again, okay. So what does he want though? Does he say what he wants them to do that would satisfy him the way he's thinking now they're active enough?
I think part of it he wants to see Kamala out there speaking a little bit more. And I think we talked about that
Yeah.
before as well. And it's actually been a criticism of hers not
Right.
doing so much media or interviews
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
sense because she's
And I'll
not
be
good at it.
honest. So I'm glad you brought that up. Did you watch the interview that she did on MSNBC?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Go if you have time. Go check it out. I don't think it was that great. And maybe people will give me heat for this. Last time I said that she didn't have the greatest debate performance, so clearly she won the debate. I didn't think
Right.
that on its own it was great. I think comparatively speaking, it was much better. But I think that she does have shortcomings, and honestly, I believe her advisors, her team, maybe she's well aware of this. They're trying to disguise that. I've heard it said that
Right.
they're trying to make this a vibe election, not a policy election. They want it to be. That's why they're going with the weird stuff. Like they're weird and we're normal. That's the message. They don't really want to go deep on policy because my sense is she's not that deep herself on policy. It just doesn't seem like, or at least she's not able to express it well enough. When you get
Right.
her being, interviewed or speaking on these things, she kind of fumbles a little bit. She doesn't come across as forceful and confident in what she's saying, and someone who has a mastery of the issues. She really doesn't. It kind of hurts me to say it, but sometimes I watch and I cringe. And I'm like, ooh, she doesn't seem like she's ready for prime time. You know what I mean? Maybe the fact that she didn't win she didn't go through the primary process and become the nominee. Because usually by the time you get to a general election, you've been through the ringer, right? You've had to win a series of primaries. You've been campaigning for president for over a year, well over a year, 2 years already. And
Right.
so because she was fast tracked to that, and because as vice president, she was kind of, I think, purposely kept out of many of these issues. It seems like she doesn't really have the experience that most general election candidates have. And I think that is a problem. And I think that's why she's trying to skate by on what works, which is vibes, right? Which is he's saying that people are eating dogs and now it's geese and ducks,
Right.
abortion rights, and so it's almost like in a sense what the Republicans usually do to win, which is instead of really focusing heavily on their policy proposals, they try to turn you off about the other side.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, she's been criticized or it's been speculated that she's just not that good at that part. So it's best not
Yeah,
to
yeah,
expose that.
yeah.
Um, because, when she has done some interviews, it's been uh it's like, okay, like she's not that should I say likable? Not really like maybe likable or not likable. It's just
She's
not
missing something. She doesn't, as
right.
I said, she doesn't look like she's ready for prime time.
Missing
She doesn't look
something.
presidential. And a lot of people are gonna be like, "Oh, you're saying that because she's a black woman?" No, I'm saying that because she has a hard time showing that she has a command on the issues, and
She
she doesn't
needs
have a.
yeah.
I'm sure she has plans, but she's not good at communicating them well. So, for
Right.
example, at the MSNBC interview, they asked her about her tax plan. Um, it should be a very simple answer. This is my tax plan. I want to set the rate at this for this. If people making this amount of money should be paying this, and this is going to do. It should have been very easy to go through that. And it was like this weird long word salad about, well, she grew up in the middle class, and then
Right.
like she didn't know where she was going even, and it's
Right.
like maybe she should be more rehearsed. Maybe like they prep for the debate, they should
Right.
prep for her to give these answers because it really shouldn't be that complicated.
Right.
But it's almost like she's overthinking everything and over. I don't know. Maybe being a lawyer, you're taught that, like
I was
analyzing.
gonna say, is that the lawyer part of her?
It may be, but now is not the time for her to talk like a lawyer. She's got to talk like
Right.
someone running for president and
Right.
have forceful answers. Be able to. We just talked about it earlier. Everything is a kind of a fast food, soundbite world. All right, I'm not saying go for the lowest common denominator, but you got to dumb it down a little bit more or make it more digestible than it is. Because
Right.
right now you're just watching it and it almost comes off as nervous energy because she's talking herself in
Right.
circles and doesn't, you know what I
Right.
mean? And then you either get the idea that she's nervous, she's not prepared for this, or maybe to your point about likability, maybe some might get the impression that she's not being honest because she's not giving a direct answer. I don't get
Right.
that impression, but it can certainly present itself that way when you're not being direct.
Right. And I think we kind of touched on that before the debate, the first debate, when we were saying like some of the things that she's going to have to overcome in that debate is, that one, people don't know a lot about her, but also then the way that she comes off when she speaks, she's going to have to kind of like uh, subdue some of those maybe fears or apprehensions people have about her, because the way she speaks just doesn't seem to connect as much. And I think the like you raised a point about she doesn't seem presidential yet. And I thought the same thing about Biden at first.
Hmm. When
He
no, because
just
Biden at first was 1988. What year?
I wasn't thinking about politics in
Okay,
1988. I'm
in
talking about
2008 when he ran for president.
coming out of the after the Obama administration, after
Okay.
those 8 years. I was like, yeah, but Biden's not presidential. He's not that
Interesting. You
guy.
know what? I heard Charlemagne the God once say he has no main character energy. I get it.
Didn't
I kind of disagree with that
at the
though.
time. At the time.
Well, yeah, but the thing is this: even in maybe after the Obama years, I don't know. In 2008, he actually really impressed me during those primaries, and that was when Obama won the nomination, of course. But when Obama chose Biden, it made me feel better about Obama because I was like, okay, Biden really has it going on. Like he is someone I can see as president. He just carried himself like a president. He was well by that point so experienced, knew what he was talking about, had a firm grasp on all the issues. You didn't think
Sure.
that he was too inexperienced and didn't know what he was doing. You felt comfortable with him as president. The knock on Obama, remember at the time, he was just a senator for what, under a
Oh
year.
yeah.
He's still too new, too fresh on the scene. Doesn't have any foreign policy experience. With Biden, all those fears were alleviated. So I really thought Biden presented as very presidential and very ready for the job back then, at least. Maybe after the Obama years, he kind of played second fiddle, and maybe that's what it was. I don't know.
I mean, he was supposed to play second fiddle. He's
Right, and
vice
so maybe,
president,
maybe
but
that impacted his, how people perceived him. Because that is the
I
thing.
didn't
People say
think.
that when someone's been vice president for a while, they have a hard time seeing them as president because they're always second in line.
Right. And that carries into a lot of different areas as well, right? I've said it, because we got to bring hip hop into it. I've said it in hip hop, right? You'll never see Spliff Star as
Oh,
a main
right.
artist. You're
I
never
thought
gonna
you. I thought you were gonna say Memphis Bleak for a second.
you're never gonna see Memphis Bleak as a
Right.
main artist. You're
Right.
never going to see the other people on Terror Squad as a main artist. You're never gonna see anybody that's in these groups where the main lead is someone that's so massive. You're never gonna see them as the main guy or main girl.
That's a good point. You said it right there. So massive. So Obama basically became such a big, massive figure in politics that he dwarfed everyone around him. And so
Yeah,
by
yeah.
comparison, Biden looked small, right? I can see that coming out of the Obama years, certainly, right?
So yeah, he just didn't give me that presidential energy. He was
Right,
Uncle Joe. He was the mean
right,
guy, even
right,
though I knew he was earnest and honest, and it just didn't seem like the lead guy. It took a
right.
couple of speeches for it to be like, okay, I see it. You know what I
But my
mean?
perspective is skewed because I saw him as a lead guy before I saw Obama as a lead guy, right? 2008, I'm like, yo, Biden, he knows what he's doing. He's the guy. And so going into his term as VP, I already saw him as a main character, if you want, right? That's why I didn't really get it not that I didn't get it, but I didn't agree with what Charlemagne said. But it makes sense when you put it into perspective of Obama is such a big figure and everyone around him is going to be seen as second to that.
Right. It's the in hip hop, it's kind of that idea, like where everyone's talking about the Godfather and then like the capo, like
Mm-hmm. The
you're not
underboss?
gonna you're not gonna see the underboss as
Yeah,
the boss because you've
right,
been paying,
right, right. And that's a problem. People seem to have this idea that the vice president always runs and becomes president is very rare. They run, sure, but how often do they really win? There's only been a handful
Right.
that have actually become president, right? Biden being one of them. And so Harris now does face that same challenge.
Sure, sure. And she's been kind of we've talked about it, man. Some people have criticized her on it. She's kind of at least given the impression of being kind of an absent VP or
Mhm.
not very much a prominent VP.
Right. And it
Whereas
hurts her
Biden,
when she tries to present as so close to Joe, right?
right,
Because then she can't really go into the deal, which is very likely that she was intentionally left out of the rooms because Joe didn't want her to gain prominence because he was planning on running for a second term and didn't want
Right.
people to say it should be her and not him. And so,
Right.
didn't want to give her any of the spotlight. She can't really say that because then that, I guess, opens up a whole other can of worms about also you didn't even have any authority. Even as vice president, the president wouldn't give you any responsibilities. What does that say? They don't want to go down that.
Right.
And so they
Right. And
pretend like everything was great. Oh yeah, we were just as close as Joe and Obama were. Obviously not the case,
right.
but they want to give that impression, and that does
Right.
actually hurt because, yeah, like you said, now it's on her, right? If Joe and her were so close and so cool all these years, well, then you look like you just didn't step up, right? Because it's not like he was
Right.
trying to hold you back. You said that was your bestie, so you can't
Right.
blame him, right? So it puts it on her.
Right. And to be fair, like I don't think we've seen a president vice president relationship like Obama Biden.
Mm,
They were very prominent, and it was clear that they were close, not just working close, but they were actual friends. That they would be the type that would probably
right.
be hanging out together afterwards, that they really talked to each other, and it wasn't just a ticket thing. So if you're trying to compare it to that, then it's going to definitely fall short. I think any of them, Republican or
Mm-hmm.
Democrat, any of them would have fell short.
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, that was his rant about it. It's basically, this is as dire as you say it is, and he agrees it is as dire as we all think it is. Then why aren't they out there doing every possible thing? He at one point he even said, "Look, Fox News likes felons, so send Hunter Biden over there to do some interviews. Like whatever you can do to get
Mm.
people to hear the message, you need to be doing it."
Do
And
you think
so,
though that the message is not getting out somehow?
um, I think we've talked about before how Democrats fail or lack in the power of messaging. So
Mhm.
some things could be falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
And if we've got, you got someone on here who seems to pay attention to politics, and if he's feeling that way, I'm sure he's not the only one.
Right.
And I think it could be because of media, you know, it could be because of the candidates, could be because she's not as visible as we'd like her to be, but people are feeling like, you know what, you should be or could be doing more,
Hmm.
right? Obama, when he was running, was everywhere. Obama, when he was in office, was everywhere.
Yeah.
He was on the late night shows. He was on the social media. Like he was like the first to really
Right.
exploit those types of avenues. And she's not doing any of that. And it, like I said, it could be because
She's
she's not
doing.
good at it,
She's not
or
doing
she's not
any.
doing it as much.
She's doing a lot of rallies and things like that. She's doing events. She's campaigning. She's doing even
Right.
retail campaigning. They drove her through Pennsylvania. She was talking to people in
Right.
Pittsburgh. She's even going to red areas because she's trying to
Right.
pick off votes here and there, and maybe even
But
help
but
house candidates.
but in comparison, and part of it's because of controversy, but Trump dominates the news.
Right. Right.
And and so and like anyone would struggle with that, because I would say if you give him credit on anything, um he is very good at getting that attention.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's an uphill battle to deal with. And if you're talking
Right.
about someone who's trying to overthrow the government, who has put actions in place, the January 6th, Project 2025 is coming, we've got the felonies he's committed, and he's getting all of the air in the room, you're going to look at the other side and be like, you need to get on it.
It's
Even if they
true.
are
It's true.
making
Yeah.
progress and they're heading the polls, you're still going to be like, you need to get on it.
Right, right. And it's kind of like the old saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. That might not entirely be true, but there's something to that because you do usually see when an election is about somebody, if they're getting all the attention, they tend
Right.
to do better. Everyone's
Right.
just talking about them. It's like
Right.
they become more prominent, more popular somehow, even if it's not necessarily good coverage. It's just
Yeah.
more attention. And yeah, that's unfortunately in today's world, and especially in politics, you need
Yeah.
attention to win.
So I thought it was a interesting rant. It went viral. People were talking
Yeah.
about it. So
Yeah. In 2016, Hillary, I think, didn't want to do too much. I think she was listening to her advisors who basically said, "Play it safe. You're winning. Play it
Yeah,
safe."
that's what failed
And
failed for her.
it didn't work out, right? There were certainly
Right,
places she should have done more: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania,
right,
Michigan, right, being the top three. So you do have to, I guess, weigh that, right? If you're the Harris campaign, number one, yeah, okay, look at the polls. She is doing very well in the polls. She does seem to
right,
be winning. So if it's working, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? If it's working, stick to
right,
it. But there's also a danger, I think, in becoming complacent and thinking
right,
that, well, it looks like we're winning anyway, so we don't need to be doing these different things. I mean,
right,
you still need to put the effort in. That can be tricky, right? I mean, talking as someone who's run for office, it can be tricky to try to find
sure,
that balance of like, well, I think I'm on the right path, so I don't want to deviate from that, but I don't
right,
want to feel like I'm too confident and not do other things I could be doing, right? Because you
right,
start to maybe even again lawyers, right? We're both lawyers, Harris and myself, but you start to think about um, okay, things are going well now. So I could do other things. There's more I could be doing. But if I do those other things, there's a risk of taking me off the path of doing well. And maybe now I'm not doing so well. So why do those things if I'm doing well without those things? Right.
right,
So, but then you don't want to do too little. So
right.
I guess you do have to take some risks, even if there's small risks, kind of like put your foot in the pool and see how deep it is type thing before you go further
Right.
in. Like you need to be doing more. Like don't make any like crazy sudden movements that are gonna tip the scales against you, but maybe try some other things. And if you gain traction with them, then do more of those things.
Right. I get, and I definitely get that. And I also get where Plies is coming from. Like, this is a very serious election. Project
Mm-hmm.
2025 is a fundamental change in the country that will set the country on a path for, the next 100 years or something like that. Because even if things keep progressing afterwards, to get all of those things reversed, if they do get them all through, is going to take a lot of time. So it's like basically the country is facing a siege moment. So it's like if you're looking at the 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 enemy is at the gates. They're on the border. They're coming through. They've got their weapons and they're going through it. And you've just got your regular guard on there. People are like, well, listen, this is a do or die
Mm-hmm.
situation. Where's the nuclear option? Let's quit playing around here. Like we know this is the end. So why are we acting like it's just a regular
Yeah, but I
campaign?
don't. Yeah, I mean, I understand that message. I don't know if anyone is acting that way, though. I think Democrats are very energized. I think turnout is going to be very high amongst people who want to come out against Trump. And I think Trump is going to have a lot of voters too. I mean, I think it's going to be another high turnout election overall. And so I don't know if people are sleeping on it. I mean, I think
I
people,
think
the VP debate tonight, I think people are very engaged with all this. You go on TikTok, all you see is political coverage. I think people
sure,
are talking
sure.
about this all the time, right? I don't know that people are not taking it seriously.
Well, I think it's easy to feel that way because Trump has so much of the media attention.
Mm,
It's easy to feel like the Democrats are kind of sleeping because
mm.
it's the conversation is all Trump. Whether
Well,
it's good or bad, it's still every time, everything that comes up, it's all about Trump or it's all
what he
about
might,
anti-Trump.
what he might really be saying is trying to get more press coverage.
It could be. Like I said, it's messaging, it's coverage, it's, all of that. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a and it was interesting and something that did connect to a lot of people, especially in the comments, where
Mhm.
feelings seem to agree with him, like, where's this sense of urgency, this type of thing.
Right. I
So,
mean, my follow up question is always, okay, well, what do you want them to do that they're not
right,
doing now? Right. You can be like,
right,
where is the urgency? And I'm like, well, I think people feel pretty urgent. All right. So tell me where they're falling
right,
short. You know?
right.
So,
So,
but yeah, but it's interesting. Like we said, she may be intentionally not doing certain things because she doesn't want to expose her weaknesses. So,
right, absolutely.
um, all right. Well, the VP debate is tonight if you're watching us live on Tuesday, October 1st. And so, what are our predictions? I know last time we made some predictions going into the presidential debate, which apparently will be the only one. And so tonight's the only VP debate. Do we think it's going to be as much of a circus, as memeable, let's say, as the first, or will it be more about policy? Will it be more understated than the presidential one?
I think Vance is going to say some crazy things. The unknown for me is how um Tim is going to respond
Mm-hmm.
and how he's going to handle Vance's craziness. Because I think Vance is going to come out and try to dominate the conversation like Trump tries to do it, talking over things, um, presenting some false assertions, and just leaning into the fear mongering. I don't know how the opposite is going to deal with that,
Yeah,
correct it. Um,
I think certainly Walls has rehearsed a few zingers, right? Because his whole thing is he really comes off as more populist, if you wish. He's
mm,
kind of like the Republican type personality in this one, you know,
mm,
as far as how it usually is, right? Usually the Democrat is seen as more wonky, maybe nerdy, professorial. He's just going to beat you to death with policy, but he's going to
right,
bore people. People in the middle of the country are going to say, I don't know what that guy was talking about, but I want to have a beer with the Republican, right? It's kind of the opposite now. It seems like
right,
Vance is like the wonkier, kind of nerdier type, and Walls is like, I'm just a regular guy. I coach football for crying out loud, right?
right,
And so I think he's going to have some zingers prepared that aren't maybe about policy or even direct responses to what Vance is saying, but it's gonna be like, like, oh, here we go again, like that kind of thing. I think, boy, aren't these guys weird? Stuff like that. I think he's gonna be saying.
yeah, and I don't know how effective that'll come off.
Yeah.
Because he's gonna have to somehow make sure that Vance's nonsense doesn't stick. And
Right.
then the
Right.
question is, what kind of fact checking are the moderators gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think in the last debate, the Trump Harris one, the moderators did a mediocre job of doing it. They did call him out and tried to hold him on several things, but they did let him continue to overtalk, get a lot more airtime, and let a lot of his nonsense stand. So I'm wondering how this is going to play out in this one, and how Walz is going to be able to handle that.
Right, right. Walls needs to show that he's got the chops, especially as we're talking about Harris looking a little weak in that department, right? When it comes to
Right,
being able to present serious policy, he can't be too chummy. I know that that's his whole brand.
right,
I'm just one of you. I'm just your buddy. But he doesn't want Vance to look like the guy who knows policy, and
right,
he's like the football coach is being outclassed. So
right,
he needs to be able to have coherent policy uh, messages, like better than Harris. I mean, even at the last debate, right? You say, well, we speculate maybe she's not that good. I saw her at the first debate. I didn't think she was that good, right? At
right,
expressing policy. He needs to be better at that, and certainly better than the brand that he has made for himself, right? Because he doesn't come off, let's be honest, he doesn't come off as the kind of guy, just from what we've seen of him on the national stage, he doesn't come off as the kind of guy who has a mastery of policy issues. He comes off
right,
as a football coach, right? No, this is the football coaches, but he doesn't seem like he's that much of a wonk. I think he needs to be a little bit. You can overdo that, right? But I think he needs to be a little bit more than that because Vance is going to come off, like you said, he's going to say some crazy things, but he's going to speak like someone who knows what he's talking about. I've been in the Senate.
right.
I've done these things, and he's going to go into more detail probably on laws, legislation, and Walls needs to be able to stand toe to toe with him in that department and not look like he's being outclassed.
Right. And I think in the same way that Kamala is still kind of an unknown to a lot of people, Walz is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Vance is another who is kind of, but he's also much more vocal. He's much more out there, much more visible. And so he's got to combat that too. Like we gotta, who are you really? Like what are we getting to know about
Sure,
you?
sure. Although the focus needs to be on the top of the ticket, right? And so
Yeah,
these are two candidates for vice president debating, but really they're surrogates for the presidential candidates. And so,
right,
as much as we need to get to know them, they really need to be advocating for their running mate above all else. Right? Walls needs to express why Harris is the choice and
right,
Vance for Trump, right? And we saw some dissension between Vance and Trump. I remember at the last debate when Trump was like, well, Vance said that. I didn't say that, right? He was trying to
right.
distance himself from what Vance was saying. And so that might come up tonight, right? Did you guys get on the same page yet? Where are you now on this? And
Yeah, well, we know that they're not chummy.
right, right. I mean,
We
yeah, I
know
mean, he called
that,
him Hitler. Vance has called him Hitler in the past, and so that should tell
right,
you what he really thinks about him.
right. And so yeah, I think it was more, the choosing him was kind of it was definitely a political move.
Sure.
Um, I don't know really how it really benefited Trump, but we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
But
I know his sons were big on Vance. I think,
really,
honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with Peter Thiel, the billionaire who funded Vance. I think
right.
Trump was trying to tap into that network.
Uh, could be. So yeah, so we'll see. I think who do you think is going to come out on top?
Hmm. I think Walz should be able to take it, but I'm not going to guarantee a win. I'm going to look at this objectively, and I do think it is easy for Walz to fall into certain traps where he'll come out looking like he lost. And so,
Right.
if he does what he's supposed to do, and hopefully he's well prepped, people can be like, "Oh, he knew the questions in advance too." So see if we hear that one. The questions are obvious. They're going to ask about the economy. They're going to ask about immigration. They're going to ask about crime, the border, abortion. Right? I mean,
Ukraine,
yeah,
Israel.
foreign policy, right? Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, Russia. It's very obvious what they're going to ask, and the answers should be relatively obvious as well. There are subtle things that they can do, and like I was saying with the last debate, you want to make sure that you're engaging with the question and not just giving a talking point to the point where it sounds like you're not even listening to the question and you just go into a canned answer.
Yeah,
But your canned answer should be able to cover like 90% of that question. Just cater it
right,
a little bit to the wording of that question, right? But these are broad topics that you're going to be asked about. You don't really
right,
get like bar exam level questions at a debate, right? It's very, very high
right.
level stuff here. And so they should be able to prepare for it and know what they're doing. So if Walz does his homework, which I think he will, and he avoids certain pitfalls like the ones we discussed, I think he should be able to win.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think he'll my feeling is that he's going to have more substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he will win on substance, but the showmanship, the attention part that Vance might grab could overshadow him depending on how he does. Even though he has more substance. I mean, this has happened before, right? Any Trump debate or any of the, previous Trump debates, there's no substance there
All right.
at all. But he grabs the attention.
Do you
And
think Vance has more charisma than Pence?
more charisma than Pence. Yeah,
I think so. I think
yeah,
Pence was more of like a typical VP, and that they're very understated. They're not trying to get attention on themselves. And
right. Very stiff.
yeah, they're almost deliberately boring, right? They're like, we
I
get
mean,
it.
even his face is like very plain. Like
Right.
it's
That's kind of the brand usually for a VP, right? The top of the ticket is larger than life figure, and maybe that can scare some people because of such a showman, and you don't know how stable they are. It's like the VP is the rock. Like I'm not that. I'm not here to grab attention. I'm here to just talk about policy, keep my head in the books, right? I think Pence was more of that in terms of his brand. Vance
yeah, yeah.
maybe a little bit more ambitious, or he comes off like more of like a grandstander.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he's one of the crazy guys. Like I think he would be at home. He would be at home on an Alex Jones interview, or he'd be
Yeah.
at home on what's the crazy guy from Fox?
They're all
Um
crazy on Fox.
yeah, the one that makes the has the show him on his own. John
Carson
Stewart.
Daly, Carson Daly, or
No, Carson Daly.
Carson Tucker. Oh,
Tucker
yeah,
Carlson.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Carson Daly was from like
TRL.
MTV DRL. Yeah,
I sit
Tucker
next to Carson
Carlson.
Daly and Fred Durst, right?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think I think he would be at home on that type of conspiratorial arena. And
Mm,
that, you know, it
yeah,
gets a lot of eyes, gets a lot of attention, but
right.
there's no substance there. There's nothing there that we
You
should
got to be
really.
careful because I think he does have more substance than Trump does, and so it's easy to underestimate him. And then when he comes out articulating a policy, like, oh wow, I didn't know that he had any substance, right? And so
Right.
I think he
Yeah.
is better at that. And be careful. Like, so I kind of think if you're playing the expectations game, Walz needs to show that he has policy. Vance needs to show that he's not crazy.
And I don't think he has the same amount of triggers as Trump. Like where you can't, there's not, at least from my impression, there's not something that you can poke him on that's going to make him go on this this long rant on the side, like Kamala did to Trump. Like, oh, no one, people leave your
There's
rallies, and then the
nothing.
next thing he's
No, I
talking
bet you
about
there.
his
I bet
rally.
you there is. I bet you there may be. What about the couch comment? I know that was made up. Like, let's be real about that. Someone just made it up on Twitter, but it became a meme, right? And even Elizabeth Warren at the DNC made reference to it in her speech, and she didn't say that he did that to couches, but she made a comment like something like Donald Trump and JD Vance. I wouldn't trust them to move my couch, and she emphasized the word couch, and everyone started laughing hysterically because they knew the reference that she was making.
Right.
And I can see Walls doing something like that. That may be triggering.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to lead Vance on a path like Trump would go on this rant that made no sense, right? And he did it
Right.
several times.
Right.
Harris poked him several times and triggered that and knew it, talking about his audience size at his rallies, right?
Right.
And make him get so flustered with that he just starts spitting out nonsense, you
True.
know.
And to be
Uh,
fair, he probably is not suffering from early onset dementia.
well, I wouldn't rule that out.
I mean, just going by his age.
I'm not ruling that out.
A lot younger.
I'm not ruling that out. Early
I,
onset. You said early
right.
onset.
Right. No, but I'm bolstering your point that he's less likely to go on this weird rant because I think he
Right,
has
right, yeah.
marbles. I don't think he's as old and senile, honestly.
Right. Yeah. But we could just sell there might still be a nugget of in there for
Something might be knocked loose. Let's put it like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where Vance dealing with Vance is going to be you're not going to have the same strategy as dealing with Trump. So
Yeah.
Walls is going to have a little bit more of a difficult time, I think, than Kamala, who's a skilled and experienced prosecutor, has in poking people, whereas Vance may not have the triggers that's going to knock him off his game like that as
Right.
much.
Right. So here's a side bet, I guess, or something we can revisit next week. Do you think over the course of the debate, Walls will make a reference to a couch or the word couch? Will he say the word couch?
Um, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Yeah, I'm
I
just
think he might.
guessing,
Yeah,
to be
I think
honest.
he might, but in like a subtle way that's gonna just make people laugh. Like even if it's something like,
I don't think so.
was there an answer couch in that response? Wait, there's something. I don't know. I can see him throwing the word in there.
Can we couch this point for a moment? And
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. You think so?
Okay,
Even as a way
question.
to potentially trigger him.
It could be.
Yeah.
So question to you: do you think there's going to be some mention of the eating of pets?
Was that supposed to be in Ohio? It was supposed to be in Ohio, right? Yeah,
I
Springfield,
think
Ohio, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So Vance is from Ohio, so yeah, I do think that will come up. Maybe even
You
a
think
knock.
it's going to come up?
Senator, yeah, like you're the senator from Ohio. This allegedly happened in your
Right.
state. I think it's gonna. Yeah, I think it will.
Because he doubled down on it as well as Trump after the last debate.
I
So
definitely think, but if you're asking if the moderators will bring it up, I think there's a very good chance. I definitely think Walls is going to try to get that in there.
mm.
Yeah, because again, his whole thing is going to be these guys are weird, man. They're saying that they're eating the pets. They're saying, these guys are weird, man. Like, that's his whole thing.
You think Walsh is going to come out and bring Vance a puppy or something?
Nah, but I do think he'll call them weird for that and for their stance on abortion and other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So yeah, there you go. We'll see what happens next week. In the meantime, we had a poll from last
We
week.
did.
I'm going to go live on Instagram. I figured this is a good time to do the IG live when we're doing the poll stuff.
Okay, so we had a poll from last week about Marcellus Williams and the execution by the state.
Right.
So our question was, did you think Marcellus Williams should have been spared the death penalty? So to remind everyone, there was a lot of opposition to him being executed, and it was from, not only his defense, but the original prosecutor, the current prosecutor's office, a judge. They had signed an agreement already to stay the execution, and then it was the attorney general and the incoming or the new governor that overturned that. Even the previous Republican governor was like, okay, we're gonna hold off on this. But they executed him anyway. And so the poll was, did you think Marcellus Williams should have been spared the death penalty? 94% said yes, 6% said no.
So overwhelmingly, people said he should have been spared.
Right. And what I'm seeing in the response is more about the death penalty. Like
Oh
we
yeah,
shouldn't have the death penalty, period.
right, right.
And not so much about the circumstances of this situation where there were so many people against it, including the prosecutors and et cetera. It's
Yeah.
more about I don't think we should give the death penalty. Nobody should get the death penalty, period. Um, it's crazy how often innocent people are convicted. It's
Yeah.
a barbaric
Well,
practice.
right, right. But if you have those views, you really don't need to go into the nuances of that case, right? Because you're
Right.
automatically going to think they should be
Yeah.
spared, right? So there's no need to even have that discussion. There should be no, of course, they shouldn't be executed. I don't believe in that, right?
Right.
We also talked about the idea that, okay, so for example, the prosecutors changed their mind and the victim's family wants them spared, and former governor, you had different people saying that this should not have
Right.
happened. But
Right.
who is and who should be the final arbiter of that? I think, kind of came to the consensus last week that you really do need a court to have the final say. And the court did have the final say, right? So we may not like the results of that. We can dispute the conclusion that they reached, but we don't think it should be unilateral where any one
Right.
act, any prosecutor can say, change the result of this case, change the result of that case, let's go back and do, right? There still should be a check on that.
Right. And uh, my, at least from my position, was that the focus of the court, even if the court has the final word, but the focus of the court needs to be one towards justice versus punishment.
Right.
And that's where
Well, okay.
it could be the danger where the court is more focused on punishment.
And that's an interesting way to cast it because usually it's cast as punishment or the kind of punishment. So punishment as in like retribution, vengeance versus rehabilitation, let's say, right? When you say justice, basically you mean getting to the truth.
Right.
And so you say that the court seems to be focused on punishment. So in other words, the court seems to be focused on upholding guilty verdicts and finding people guilty instead of getting to what really happened.
Yeah, I mean, this seems more like a procedural action, right? Well, we've already done this, so let's go ahead and continue and carry it out, even though so many people are saying, "Hey, you know what? Wait a minute, we might have got this wrong." Um, it should have been like, "Oh, well, you mean we might have gotten this wrong? Okay, well, let's hold off. Let's make sure before we execute a man."
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah, I mean,
and
what they had said was they had not seen any evidence to suggest his innocence. And they said that the arguments that were being raised by the attorneys were the same ones that were argued unsuccessfully before, and shot down by other courts. And so they're not presenting any new arguments and apparently didn't bring
right,
up any new evidence. So they said they had no grounds to overturn the conviction. Now, again, if
yeah,
you're against the death penalty, you don't like any of this, right? And of course, you think it
sure,
should have stopped at any step along the way. And I agree with that, right? But I'm also
sure,
trying to figure out what the system should be, right? Yes, I agree. The system should be no death penalty. But putting that aside, the system of criminal justice, right? And then how do these convictions get overturned? And what makes them get
right,
overturned? Why should they not be overturned? When should they not be overturned, right? And I do think we need to have courts deciding that. Now, you're saying they should be focused more on justice. I agree. And I think the criminal justice system should be focused more on rehabilitation than retribution. But that's not, maybe related, but different
right.
discussion.
But well, yeah, I think it is related in a sense that it's a different mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's one of uh not finality and punishment and one of incarceration. It's one of how do we, like you said, not retribution, but how do we
Rehabilitate.
rehabilitate? How do we get past this? How do we get this person to serve their time and have justice for whoever the victims of it were, and then move on and have this idea, this more optimistic ideal of people in a
Yeah,
citizenry.
right, right. And I think maybe this can be boiled down to it's an us versus them mentality right now, right?
Right,
You're talking about the type of punishment that you have. You're talking about when the conviction should be overturned, whether you're
right,
talking about getting to the truth of what happened versus just trying to convict someone, right?
right,
This adversarial type of system.
right, right.
Prosecutors are pressured by the
Yes.
public, and even if you want to look at people who work in the prosecutor's office, they're pressured by the people above them
The
to
police are pressured.
right to make as many arrests and convictions as
Yeah.
possible. And
Right,
so, and not to lose a case also, right? And so
right, right.
when the goal of winning supersedes the goal of getting to the truth, you do have a problem.
Right. And I think that is what needs to be addressed ultimately. And would, make less of these situations prominent, if we have more of that. So
Right,
well,
right.
that was kind of what the responses here were. Overwhelmingly, people were
Okay.
against it. And all the comments were basically more about not having the death penalty, period. So,
How do you guys
and then
feel
some,
on
yeah.
IG Live? We are live on Instagram right now. Scala Vision. I see one and only bearded bastard. Okay. Navish Mahadio will join. Okay, he wants to be in the video. How does that work? Does that mean they get to talk to us on video? I've never done this before. I got
No,
a
well,
request.
he would be on your IG video. So yeah,
Not right, not on the Zoom, but yeah,
right,
okay.
right. He'd be on the IG video.
I see
He should be watching live on Facebook.
I see
Once
NY
again.
Pat joined. What's up,
Uh,
Pat?
um,
Yeah.
and everyone watching, go to the YouTube and subscribe to the channel, Nuance Show. Make sure you're on there.
Yes.
Leave your comments in there. We want to hear from everybody. So
Yeah, so the basic question, I mean, we asked about obviously the conviction and execution of Marcellus Williams last week, but we also want thoughts on the death penalty, right? Do you think we should have
right,
capital punishment? In New York, we don't have it at the state level anymore. And
right.
I don't know if I talked about the fact that it used to be the law, but it was overturned. It was found to be unconstitutional based on the way that it was in practice, essentially,
Mm,
because the way that the system was set up for capital cases, you had the jury who had to decide if the person should be executed or not, right? Should they receive the death penalty or not? But they don't get to decide parole, right? Or parole options. And so if their choices are death or a life sentence, what the state found was many jurors were voting for death, but would have preferred life without the possibility of parole. But
mm,
the jury was not able to put that in there, right? There was a binary choice, death or life sentence. And too many jurors chose death because they were afraid the person would end up getting paroled later on. And so that was found to be unconstitutional because people were being sentenced to death even when the jurors didn't think they should get the death penalty. They just found it as less bad, right? Or somehow more preferable to parole.
it's still weird, but okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
You think that's
Gotcha.
weird?
I
How's that work?
do, because you're still voting for someone to die. You're still executing someone. I mean, even if you think, oh, they might get out, you're still
Right.
voting for them to be
You're right. Yeah.
murdered by the
I
state,
don't know if that,
essentially.
yeah, no, I agree. I disagree with capital punishment. So I get what you're saying. Yeah, okay, I understand that. I don't know if weird is the word I would use because I understand people's fear, right? They're concerned that the person who's, let's say, a convicted murderer now, maybe they're a serial killer,
Yeah, yeah.
someone really, really crazy, a really, really a bad person who most likely even beyond rehabilitation. They're afraid that they're going to be back out on the streets again. And so they want to ensure as members of a jury that they're putting someone away for good, right? Now, again, they usually preferred life without parole, but when they were told if you vote for life, the person could end up back on the streets in 15, 20 years, right? They were like, one of
Yeah.
that. So it was pushing people to make a decision that they really didn't
Right.
want to, and people were dying because of it. And so
Right.
that's how the system was set up. It was determined to be unconstitutional in New York. We don't have it anymore, right? As we
Okay.
see, it does still exist in other states. Like what was that? It was Ohio, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was Ohio, right? So is that going to come up on the debate? It could. I mean, if we're talking about Ohio issues,
Maybe that's a possibility. That's definitely a possibility. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned, I think we're coming up on the hour here. We wanted to also get into New York because you mentioned New York
Right.
and Mayor Adams.
Right. So let's do that while we have the IG live up for anyone watching. We're going to talk about Mayor Adams, and you can watch the whole discussion on Nuance. We're live on Facebook as well. That's where you'll be able to see the podcast live. We'll also be on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts after the fact. But for those watching live on Instagram right now, the poll question of the week is going to be, I guess I should put it out for everyone, right? Because we
Yeah,
use
let's go for it.
the poll question of the week is, now that Mayor Adams has been indicted, do you believe it's time for him to resign?
Right.
And so
Um,
to be continued for those watching the IG,
yeah,
Facebook Live, or anywhere else you get your podcast. Thank you for joining us. And I'm still new at this. We'll see how I can close this out. Okay, here we go.
yeah, you didn't accidentally but live.
Right.
So yeah, like the Club Shay Shay guy. But yeah, I think it's he's charged with some pretty serious things and it could hinder his ability to govern at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, the trade off, right? Or the question that you need to ask yourself. On the one hand, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. They have
Right.
due process,
And he
right?
maintains his innocence.
Maintains his innocence, and he says he's eager to go to court and let that play out. He's going to come out an innocent man, right? So he has every right to do that. And if he is innocent, I applaud him fighting to
Sure,
maintain it.
sure.
So we cannot act as though he's guilty because he's been indicted, right? A grand jury has indicted him, found probable cause, and all right, but he hasn't been convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's
Right,
number one. At the same time, he is mayor of New York City, the biggest and most important city in the whole country, perhaps the most important city in the whole world. And it goes without saying, there's a ton of pressure on anyone who's the mayor. And you do have to question whether one can do that job effectively with all of those pressures on you, right? And
right,
we're talking political pressures included, by the way, right? Calls for him to resign, people not wanting to work with him anymore because they don't want to be associated with him. They don't want to look like they're guilty. They don't want their
right,
voters to be turned off, right? All kinds of things. And so it gets harder for him to have the relationships and keep those relationships that he needs to mayor. Also, while he is tied up in court and his mental and emotional energy is directed that way, how can he spend it on running the city, right? And so I
right,
think there are real practical reasons why you may not want a mayor or any elected official still in office while they're under indictment. But again, I'm the attorney, right? I mean, I got to think like a lawyer here. I don't like the idea of anyone who's indicted got to step down before they're convicted because that seems to be a
right,
violation of the due process.
right. And on top of that, if that were the case, if it was like a default that anyone indicted would do that, people would start using it as a political
Exactly.
strategy.
Exactly.
And just to get them out of the way.
Right.
So
And
if
by the way,
he's
just real quick on that point, there are already people, I look at my timeline, people who are already saying that this was political, right?
mm,
Because Mayor Adams, is not liked by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And if he is forced out of office, the public advocate Jumaane Williams, who is part of the progressive wing, would become the acting mayor. And so you are seeing people say things like, well, this is done to him because he was pushing back on the immigration issue, right? He was saying that the city could not afford the influx of migrants, and he was fighting back on that. And going to the
right,
federal government on that issue. And because he dared speak up on that,
right,
the progressive now are trying to push him out. And so, whether that's true or not, you do have people already believing that. And
right,
to the point, you can certainly envision a scenario where that could happen, right? Let's say, for
sure,
example, the DA was a member of that wing of the party, and it could be any wing of any party, but let's say with the coalition that did not like the acting elected official, right? You could see enormous pressure being put on that DA to get them under indictment for any reason. And they said you could indict a ham sandwich, right? You ever heard that expression? It's, you can indict someone, can you convict them? So
yeah,
there will be a ton of pressure to indict someone to force them out of office if it was
yeah,
known that that would happen automatically.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think you just answered one of the questions in the chat. There was a question in the chat that said, "What happens if he resigns?" And I think you mentioned who
Yeah.
would
So
step up.
and let's be clear on this. Jumaane Williams, who's the public advocate, would become the acting mayor. It's not like it was when Gerald Ford took over for Richard Nixon. Resigned. He became president until the remainder of the term. No. He's the acting mayor, but he needs to call a special election, and that needs to happen relatively quickly. And it's in the law, but there's a timeline for it. It's really in a matter of weeks, really. So he doesn't get to finish out Adams' whole term. He has to call a special election in a prompt fashion to replace Adams. So he's only the acting mayor until the new mayor is elected with a special election.
Right. So, well, that answers that question.
Yeah.
So
And now you
it's
have people, I guess this is a little bit off topic, but just on that point of the special election, we have ranked choice voting in New York City now. And
mhm.
so we have different candidates lining up. Of course, there are people lining up to run for mayor in the regularly scheduled election next year anyway. But with the idea of there being a possible special, it's making things more intriguing. And you have candidates trying to figure out how that might break down. I mean, normally there's a concern about splitting votes, right? Like, let's say you have, in a New York City special election, they're nonpartisan, so you don't have a primary. It's not like Democratic primary, Republican primary. It's just one election, everybody in it. And so you might normally have a concern about, well, if you have 20 Democrats running and one Republican, that Republican could win by the Democratic vote being split 20 ways. But
Right.
with ranked choice voting, that becomes more difficult, right? Because you need the majority of votes. And if you don't get it with first choice votes, then you got to look at the second choice votes. And so the person who wins generally, or at least on paper, in theory, right, should have a broader coalition and more broad-based support. But all these things are being looked at now, all these variables being considered when people are deciding should they step it, should they prepare for the possibility of a special and being in it, right? You have Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, who is very heavily weighing this right now because he had put some polling out about running for mayor. The thought was he probably wouldn't if Adams was, like maybe, but probably not. But with this going on with Adams, it becomes much more likely that he does run, right? So everyone is looking at this through a political lens and what happens now.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been seeing a couple of things recently on social media about people asking about Cuomo if
Yeah.
he's going to do that or not.
So,
So
by the way, off topic, but Mets win the first game of the series in the playoffs with the Brewers. So, congratulations to the Mets. I've been watching them on mute as we've been talking.
okay, okay. So yeah, I guess from here tonight is the vice president debate. What time is that supposed to start?
Yeah, I believe 9 o'clock. Someone can correct me on that. So,
So another 30 minutes. All
yeah, it
right.
could be soon.
So
Yeah. So, what are
we'll
your
be
thoughts about it?
looking.
Before we wrap up? What are your thoughts on the Adams indictment, aside from whether he should step aside? Just what he's been accused of. It's a little odd. Right? You used the word weird before. This seems a bit weird that the mayor of New York City would get caught up in something like this, allegedly, but that's what they're saying.
Right. But it's yeah, I mean, this is also the cop mayor. So, that's that makes it a little bit more supposedly makes it a little bit more surprising. Um, but this is not a sudden thing, right? We talked about this back, I think it was back in probably around March, April when people around him were getting accused of dealing with the Turkish government, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, he actually has been in a movie. Did you see the clip? He was in a movie that was done in Turkey. I think it's in Turkish.
what?
Yeah, back in like 2017, though. So he's been dealing with Turkey for a very long time.
Yeah, I did. No, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
Was he an actor? Was he a
No, he was playing himself, I think. I just saw the clip up. You can go on YouTube and watch it. It's like, it looks like he's coming out of City Hall or coming out of a court, like the steps of a building he's walking down, and he's surrounded by two Turkish guys. And I think he might even say, I don't speak Turkish or something like that in the clip. I think he's playing himself because he wasn't mayor then, but he was, I guess, borough president of Brooklyn already. And he was a state senator before that. So he's already in politics. And it was like a
okay?
cameo appearance of, like let's get this New York City politician in our movie. I think it was a rom com in Turkey.
That's a little strange, especially given that he really didn't have a name for himself, like to get him in there.
But he was
Okay.
dealing Turkey for a while. Well, that's the point. He had connects in the
Right. So
Turkish
he's got
government.
those connections.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think, listen, if he's guilty of it, I think he should be held accountable.
right. Now, so people are saying, people. I sound like Trump now. The indictment, I should say, is saying that he essentially is corrupt. Right. What they're saying is that
Right.
he received gifts from Turkey in exchange for doing favors for them, right? One of the things they're
Right.
saying is that he told the FDNY to go easy on the inspection of the Turkish consulate. Apparently, there were violations and unsafe conditions there, and he said, "Hey, give these guys a break, right? Let's not go hard on
Right.
them." And also, they said he didn't issue a statement on Armenian genocide Remembrance Day. I guess that relates to Turkey because that was the Ottoman Empire, which predates Turkey, right? That was responsible for that genocide. And
Right.
so yes, that's a sensitive topic for the Turkish government. It's just, to me, it's a weird thing to catch a rap for, right? Like you're gonna put your whole mayoral career on the line over issuing a tweet about Armenian genocide. Like that's what you're gonna bank your, you know what I mean? Like that's, to me, that sounds kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is kind of interesting. Like it's just the whole thing is kind of interesting in general. Like even the
Yeah.
connection with Turkey, why he would do that.
Well, you know
Um,
what? I'll tell you why, because this is also part of the indictment. A lot of it has to do with fundraising. And so part of
yeah,
it is that he received illegal campaign contributions in the form of straw donations. I think we might have covered this on a show once before, but when you're running for office, especially in New York City, when you have matching funds, right, there are very
right.
strict limits on
Sure.
who can give you money and how much they can give you, right? And also how much of it is eligible for matching, right? So they've got these very strong programs like for every dollar donated to your campaign, the city will match it 8 to 1. Well, that's huge, right? You raise $100, they give you
Right.
$800, right? So 100 turns into 900 that way. But like I said, very strict rules on that. And so they'll say, for example, it's only matchable up to the first $175. So
Mhm.
what do some people do? This is illegal, right? But people have gotten caught doing this. This is part of the indictment here. They're saying to get around that, he had other people give him smaller donations, but the money didn't come from those other people. It really came from the Turkish government or the Turkish nationals, I guess. But
Right.
he received matching funds on money, which is taxpayer money from the city that he was
Right.
not eligible to receive, right? And
Right.
also, he did not allegedly disclose the gifts he received, like travel
The
benefits,
hotels, the
right?
trophy
Airline
hotel, the
upgrades,
luxurious entertainment.
right? All of that needs to be disclosed so that the public knows what kind of gifts you're getting and whose bidding you might be doing here. And so
Right.
he didn't do that, and it all seemed, the big picture, right? The narrative that's being presented is this is a form of corruption, that he was secretly colluding with them, not wanting people to know obviously what he was doing, and he was in exchange giving them gifts. And so this is being presented as bribery, right? They gave him money
Right.
and he did favors for them in return.
Right.
um, we'll see how it plays out. He's saying he's innocent. His lawyer is saying that there's no evidence that he's, I saw a press conference. His lawyer said no text messages or emails that would show he's guilty. So there's no way they can possibly prove that. I don't know if they're going to rely on witness testimony, snitches, or what have you. I don't know how that's going to be proven, but his lawyer, at least now, is presenting confidence that there's no evidence against him. We'll
Well, I
see.
say, listen,
We'll see.
if there's no
It is.
evidence,
Anytime you deal with public corruption, I think it's serious, right?
absolutely.
And as you said, if true, he should be held accountable. Certainly should not be mayor, and he should be subject to whatever is the appropriate criminal penalty. I don't believe in a death penalty. I don't believe in being overly harsh, but the
Right.
appropriate penalty, absolutely, right? No one should be above the law. And so,
Absolutely.
yes, let this all play out in the court of law. Give everyone the chance to present their evidence and make their case, and let the chips fall where they may. As for whether he should resign now, I don't know. I don't think it should be automatic. Like we talked about the
Now,
danger. I don't think anyone indicted should automatically have to resign or be forced out. But I think maybe that's a case by case evaluation as to whether you can still do the job, right?
right.
Hopefully he will be honest about that. Hopefully the people around him will be honest about that. And hopefully the public will be able to look at the results, right? Maybe divorce the actual indictment from the practicality of, is he able to run the city? Is his performance suffering because of this? And make the evaluation that way.
Absolutely. It almost sounded like a bottom line, even though it was very specific on Mayor
Yeah.
Adams, but more about the ideology or the idea around the justice system and how we should let it play out and carry out.
We have talked about that. I'm trying to think of what is the common thread throughout this discussion here, because we talked, I think, initially about our society becoming more fast food like, becoming more short form content, more digestible content as
You
opposed
know,
to
you
longer
said
ideas.
that it's funny. It's like it reminds me of one of my lyrics, and I can't for some reason. I know the song, but I can't think about the second part of it because
Fast
it's
food, forgettable lyrics and lifestyle.
fast food, forgettable music, and lifestyle. Still
Still trying to
something.
be hood in the penthouse. Stop that
Stop
right
it
now.
right now. Yeah, there we go. That's what it was.
Yeah. I know your
Um,
lyrics better than you.
yeah, right. Man, it's horrible. It's bad, man.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
So the
So
bottom line is we got no time for the jibber jabber.
we had no time for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Why
is
don't
the
you take a
threat?
crack at it? I've given the bottom line recently. Why don't you go for it?
What is the
Yeah, try to thread these topics together. Like what
So
is the
we had yeah. So we had the we talked about the death penalty here. We talked about, giving justice a chance.
Hmm.
You know what? Let's how about maybe that's a little bit of a thread, kind of tying in Mayor and kind of tying in what happened in the Marcellus Williams case.
Hmm.
You know, let's do more seeking for truth instead of grandstanding and punishment. Um, so that
Hmm.
we can have a fairer outcome, so everyone can have what's intended to be their day in court, so to speak. But have it from the mindset of we're not trying to be vindictive. We're actually in a search for truth so that we can get uh, better results, more equitable and more fair results. So in the mayor's
Right,
case,
right.
we
Yeah.
want to make sure we know what happened here. We want to make sure we know what happened. We want to make sure it was clear and that he's held accountable or that he's exonerated. Instead of going into it with this idea, let's punish this guy in power for something we suspect him of doing. With the Marcellus Williams case, it's like if there are questions, there are doubts, let's take every action we can
Yeah. I
to
like
make
that.
sure that we don't execute or punish an innocent person. So
And when it comes to the debate, right, everyone's going to be looking at the style and the one-liners and all that kind of
right,
stuff. It's actually trying to get to the bottom of what
let's
they're
get
saying and they
yeah,
really represent. Yeah.
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 So maybe that's a thread that
That's a
puts
good.
all
I
this.
like that. That's a good bottom line. I think it's consistent with the flavor of our bottom line, right? Like let's move away from this extreme polarization, extreme fast food, extreme left to right, black and white stuff, and let's try to get to more nuance.
Some more nuance. There we go.
Nuance. Yeah. So before we wrap up here, quick correction: it was Missouri that executed.
I'm sorry, what?
It was the state of Missouri, not Ohio.
I'm sorry. No, we're not going to let that stand. That state is Missouri.
Oh, I thought they said it like Missouri. People who live there. Is that? Did you ever live in there?
No, I've never lived in Missouri. No.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, we would say Missouri, and yeah, in New York we would say Missouri, but I believe I could be wrong. I don't know. It's like Nevada, Nevada. We try to
Some
be
people would,
fancy and say Nevada. They say no, it's Nevada, right?
right,
I
right.
always thought that they called it Missouri, but it's that state. It's the MO state,
MO, right. You're
Big
right.
Mo.
MO state.
They executed. We did say it was Ohio, so that may not come up in the
Right.
context of JD Vance at the debate because it wasn't his state, but it still might come up. Who knows at the debate? I do want to give the rubber chicken of the week to the state of Missouri for
Yes.
still executing people. How about that? So
Yes.
barbaric, cruel, and unusual, in my opinion. Um,
Absolutely.
there you have it. So another great discussion. Thank you all for joining us.
And follow us on Nuance Show on YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere podcasts are available. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, all of that stuff as well.
Yes.
And yeah, check in with us.
As always, we've got work to do, and we'll catch you next time.